if you want to make a presentation about how to work with social media, the presentation should be like 1,000 slides. So there are so many things that you can cover, and it's really hard to pick the right things that I wouldn't repeat others. And I should say that I never really looked into any courses before, so I don't know what others talk about, but I hope that I will be showing you sort of my own personal perspective on all of this. So what I'm gonna do is first, we have a certain number of people. I was wondering how many of you, okay, so if some of you can write how many followers you have on LinkedIn, for example. So I'll be talking mostly about LinkedIn and partially about Twitter, but mostly about LinkedIn. So if everyone or some of you could write it in the chat, I'll greatly appreciate, because it will tell me a little bit about the audience. If you don't know, just write, I don't know, like IDK. Okay, great. So I already see that we were above 500. Great. So let me then start. And this is my first time I'm using Teams on the speaker side, so excuse me if I have some trouble with navigating it. I'll try to make it easy. Okay, so this will be most of the talk, small talk, relatively small. I'll try to make it short, but then I'm open for your questions. So feel free to use this time for your questions. And if you have like very specific questions during the presentation, you can also, I don't know if you can raise your hand or something, but you can ask. It's totally fine for me. Like we can have a discussion during the presentation, because I think it's very essential to make sure that certain concepts are well understood. Great. So this will be mostly about LinkedIn and Twitter. You all know that there's lots of different social media. So my point would be that the first to say is that every social media has its own preferences in terms of algorithms as to how you can interact with your audience. And when I say here for academia and professional growth, so I'm from academia, and for me it's sort of natural. And for professional growth, what I mean by this is, in the first place, is that you communicate to professionals. So for professionals, it means for those who have very little time, who are busy people, who may want to be able to spend as little time on social media as possible with as much output for them as possible. So that means that whatever you post on social media, if you want to really have the attention from the professional community, you want to have it several things. First, everything that you put there should be relatively short. And finally, it should be very valuable. So whatever you put should be valuable. This is the key. So any professional who reads one or two posts from a person which are not really valuable for them, most likely will start skipping them next time. And once the person starts skipping posts, those posts will disappear from their trace very quickly. So the algorithms will no longer feed those posts, your post, to that feed, to that person. And this is sort of the nutshell of my presentation. So you need to really keep that in mind whenever you interact with professionals. Of course, if you go outside of the professional world, if you're trying to communicate, or not communicate, just collect the audience, you can just post, kittens or like fun videos or whatever. But this is a completely different type of a story, so I'm not going into this. This is purely for professionals. So what is the social media about? This is essentially about the social interactions. So we all have to do social interactions, right? We're social creatures. We have to do it. But the difference is that instead of interacting one-on-one or one-on-two, here we interact with a crowd. So imagine that you have in front of you all of your followers. So you said you have like 500, 700, maybe a few thousand followers, maybe more. Imagine that they all are in front of you as a crowd. They might be distracted by their phones, by their friends, whatever. How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep their attention on what you're trying to tell them. And of course, some of them are interested in what you think. So this is sort of the way that I usually ask people to think about, because we often underestimate the actual influence on the social media. So the actual crowds could be huge. If you imagine it in real world, it will be very big. So anything that you put there, of course, goes to a very large number of people. Now, the difference is that those people can be dispersed all over the world, or they can be from a specific niche of your field. This is what I'm going to go later into, but this is very essential to keep in mind. So you talk to the crowd, which means that you don't talk to one or two people. So your style of communication should not be targeting a certain number of people only. Okay. Now, for the algorithms, this is essential. So the social media are all about the algorithms, because every person has a fixed number of posts they can see during the day. Imagine that you have 10,000 people in your followers, so you cannot see, every one of them cannot see your post that day, just simply because there's not enough space, not enough time. So what it means is that the algorithms pick specific posts. That's obvious. So now you have to stand out, but you have to stand out not just for the people, among the people, among the rest, if you want your posts to propagate far and so on, but you want to stand out for the algorithms. And this is where some of the differences are. Of course, algorithms, I will discuss what algorithms really do, but this is very essential to keep in mind. And so there are many people who are, of course, also super active on social media. They might be active, when they talk to a big crowd online, but then if you meet them in real life, they are often quite shy and quite timid. So they try to go away from a crowd. They're not in the middle at all, just because they're introverts, many of them. So if you feel like you're an introvert, so it's not for you, keep in mind that most people are actually introverts who are quite active on social media. I mean, including myself. So you will not find me in the middle of the crowd in real life. Usually I'm outside. Now, what is it really for? So some people really wonder, okay, what can you get out of it for yourself? You spend time, you invest your energy. What can you really get out of it? So everyone defines the output, if you put it this way, by themselves. So you have to know what you really need that for. Do you want to help the community? Do you want to help yourself in some way, or help your company, and so on? So normally in a professional world, at least what I find to be really important, what I see not only from my own experience, but from others' experience too, is that you have a pretty large professional audience. So your audience can be tens of thousands of people, highly professional people, whom you will never see in a single audience in any conference. So one post that you put online can exceed substantially any sort of conference audience that you can put together, even all the conferences you can put during the year in your field. So it's quite easy to do this. The thing is that it's where you should understand that the impact can be big, and that's where your so the outcome for you can also be quite valuable. So here, the thing is that first, your voice is heard. So whatever you say is important. If it's important to others, people will hear it. Of course, you have to make it sure that it's important. Then your work is seen. Say you publish a paper, you have your some results, or your company developed a certain product, so it's visible. Now you can get also at some point start getting invited talks. You can get new collaborations and so many other things, as long as your audience is growing and you have those professionals there who are ready to communicate with you because they see you in person through your posts. Second thing is that it's communication skills that you can get. And here, some people will say that, well, we have so many communication skills already developed. Why do we need to really invest into social media? But here I should say that in social media, your communication skills should be very specific. But at the same time, they're super valuable because you're sort of on a free market. You're competing for attention in some way. So there, you learn how to write, and write concisely and clearly. This is extremely important because if you if you really analyze what you do and you invest time into this, over time you learn how to put your thoughts very concisely, very clearly, and it will help you. If you work in academia, it will help you to write grants, to write papers, to present at conferences, because your presentation, if you have a 10-minute talk, that 10-minute talk is really concise and you have to fit so many things into it. How do you do it? How do you really know what the audience, how the audience may perceive your talk? So the social media can be sort of a playground for you to probe your own styles. Of course, you learn about the emotions that people have emotions, and there are so many things you can learn about it through the social media, how people respond to what and in which way. Of course, you learn also how to make visuals really cool. So again, if you invest time into this. And finally, I think that the third thing that I really want to highlight is your feedback. The feedback from the social media. So you have so many people and you see what is interesting to those people, what really triggers their attention, what triggers their emotions, what's really in them that you can really ignite sort of yourself. And then you have, of course, an opportunity to identify certain niches and some topics where you can outshine others, where you can help, as a result, the community, or you can build your business, or you can do whatever else, because a lot of people don't quite know what to do in some way. A lot of, especially younger people, they're still looking sort of for their different opportunities, not only job opportunities, but in general in the future. And so social media can give you sort of that feedback on your interests. So you can see, okay, is there any niches and how big they are? And finally, you can identify your uniqueness. And that's where, you know, your friends can say, well, you're unique in this way or in that way. But actually, if you get statistics, that's the best way. And social media provides you the statistics. So here I want to highlight several things. First, your voice is heard. This is number one, very important. So what you say starts to matter really to others, to a big number of people. Second is you can learn how to be concise and clear. That's essential in communications. Number one thing in communications. And finally, you see in which way you can be unique for others, how they perceive your uniqueness. Now, just a second, I want to keep an eye on, okay. So the types of content, I mean, many of you probably on social media, I hope that some of you may be using it more or less daily. So you can see lots of different types of content. So I'm going to very quickly go over the key ones that at least myself, I identify sort of different pathways. But of course, when you post it, you can mix them. So I personally post about everything in that sense, as long as I find it to be valuable for others and to be important. So those, the first, you know, direction is the your authentic opinion, your sort of authentic posts about your personal journeys, about your personal life, your personal job experiences, and so on. So others could be opinions and visions. So if you have your own vision for a field, or you have a vision for something, for technology, or you have an opinion on, say, how peer reviewing is happening, you can post it, and that's valuable. That's super valuable because it's your personal thing. People really love seeing personal opinions. They don't like seeing generic ones because they're generic. There's nothing interesting there often. Then there are, of course, posts that are informational or newsletters, kind of. Those usually don't go well, but you can find some accounts that are really good there. What I find to be important really is the education and mentorship and inspiration-oriented posts. Those help people identify their own strengths, sort of identify what they're missing, in which way they can develop, and so on. This is very valuable for the community, so people will be really happy to see those posts from you if you can write something really interesting for them. And finally, of course, advertisement, job promotions and updates. So the job promotions and updates, those are quite popular on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn seems to be pushing it forward in terms of algorithms. But I should say that usually they bring little value just as blunt promotions. So you don't expect that many people to be interested in you personally just because you got a job promotion. So this is where you can announce things perfectly fine. But this is the type of post that I typically try to not to post much about. And now I'm going to give you a few examples. So 5,000 followers. When I had that amount, approximately, maybe a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I just copy pasted that post. So it's cut, so it's longer. But I had a post about what is the point of doing a postdoc. So I often post about different aspects of academia. So here, 5,000 followers. So from a social media perspective, again, you can see metrics, you can see statistics, and that's important too, because it gives you that feedback. So a lot of people found it to be useful. You see many comments, you see number of views, impressions is pretty much number of views. And now, just about an hour ago, I put a post online on social media. I have close to about 50,000 followers, close to that. So I put this about this event, and the post was pretty short. So here, this was actually much longer. You can find it online if you want. But the shorter one was this: happening in 1 hour, no registration, just connect, and direct link. And okay, the image. And I got a nice one little like in about 20 minutes. I mean, I could say that in 40 minutes. Now it's almost 1 hour. So in the first 1 hour, usually you accumulate your the number of reactions that really help you propagate the post further. Because if you just get one, it means that the post will not go far at all. So you see the difference? You have a lot of followers, one reaction. This was done intentionally. Now, 5,000 followers only, and pretty good impact. You can put even 50 followers or 500 followers. You can still get a pretty good engagement with your community just because your post is valuable. So what means here is that your content matters a lot. I see a lot of people posting things like what I'm showing on the right side, and they don't go far, and very few people can really see them. And then people are like, okay, maybe we don't quite understand social media. Maybe we should just not really use it. But my goal is to make sure that you understand that there are things that really matter on social media, and it doesn't take that much time to really change it. So I'll show you what happened next. So I posted about 5 days ago about this event, a post where I put a lot more content inside. So I describe what exactly it will be like and so on. And now here you can see that the engagement was much better because so some of you probably came because of that post here. And then on the right, it's what I posted, like I said, just today. And there's nothing. So the same post, same type of message, but just different content inside. So exact content really matters, what's inside the post. So don't assume that if you put something online, it will automatically be shown to all of your followers. The algorithms will define the interest that people may develop. They will try to predict it, that people may develop in your post. And if your post is, it probably presents low interest, defined by, again, the algorithms, not by people, it will not be shown to many people. And that's again, a very important thing. So how do you get started? I don't know how many of you, but it looks like you don't have like hundreds of thousands of followers. So some of you may find, okay, it's interesting. Okay, maybe we should start, but how do we start? So a few things that I want to say.
There is a question, Andres. There
Absolutely.
is a question. Maybe before you move to the
Go
next
ahead.
part. Go for it. The person who raised their hand, can you ask your question? And unmute yourself. Normally, you should be able to unmute yourself. Let's move on then. Sorry.
Yeah, or you can write it in a chat if, let me see. Yeah, the chat is still empty. So, okay, you can write it in the chat if you want. But I should say that I don't see any video, so it doesn't stay on when I'm showing the slides. So you have to interrupt me if you...
Wait, he will type in the chat. Oh, let's get it.
Yeah,
it's
so,
Go for
So
it.
the question is about what time posts should be done, posting and sharing of content, at which time of the day, perhaps, right? And so here I should say timing is very important. You want to post your stuff only when your audience is there. So let's suppose everyone is sleeping. Who will be reacting to your post? Very few people. And if very few people react, then the algorithm will assume that your post is not interesting. So it will just downvote it, and you will get your audience being probably 10 times smaller. So I will discuss it later, but the timing is very important. Yep, I like my own posts. First, why not? And second is, again, it's something that at the beginning, when you post something, your first number of impressions are important. So how many people really reacted to your post will help it accelerate the propagation. If I can add an extra like, great, why not? Okay, maybe I can go further. So how do you start? See, my suggestion is, again, if you're a bit new to this, or you feel uncomfortable, or you feel like you don't know where to start with something simple and obvious. You can start with obvious posts. They usually don't go very well because they don't have your personality inside, but they still are much better than nothing. So you can start with simple posts and see how people react. And then slowly you can make things more and more complex. My suggestion also is to avoid obvious topics, like ABC topics that everyone, like, you don't post something obvious. And try to write less than more. This is where a lot of people make a mistake. They write a huge number, I will show you later, huge number of text, and it just doesn't go far because nobody has time to read it. Like I said, professional people have very little time. They will think twice whether they want to read it or not. So I would suggest first to get some sort of reputation before you start posting something really big and long. And finally, as a result, you have to try to maximize the density of information. This is essential. So information should be super clear and dense, not like lots of sentences that are not bringing anything new, because some people will just stop reading. So not obvious posts are skipped. Don't overuse icons and emojis. So this is something that people do all the time. To be honest, it's hard to read it. You will get some people reading it, but a big chunk of the audience will just drop off. I would suggest not to use them at all, unless you have a very clear idea of how to put them and where. And also see that as a learning curve. So it will take probably a half a year or so for you to slowly ramp it up and then see how your audience responds and find your own style. So you have to be able to adjust the style, the topics, and so on. So that's how you search for your niche, you search for your audience, and you search for the things that you can really bring on the table, like something valuable. Let me give you an example. So this is an example of a post. So the post says the following: the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening. Birds chirp and sing in their melodious tunes, and the grass is green, sky is blue, blah blah blah. Finally, you can see that the color red is associated with the stop signs and fire tracks. Great, as if we didn't know it. And these sentences are obvious and unexciting to read. Right? So the last sentence is like, okay, that makes sense now, finally. Why I'm showing this is that this is a very typical example of a post that is obvious. There are lots of posts that are obvious that should not be there because nobody will be interested among the professionals to read an obvious post. You want to intrigue people, you want to trigger their curiosity, and obvious posts will not do this. Overly complicated posts likewise will not do it because few people want to really turn on their brains to an extent when they can really understand all the technical details. And this is actually comes back to the papers. So if you publish a paper in a big journal and then you want to put it online, don't expect that people will understand it. You have to really make it simple. Now, how do you do this post? So first you start with an idea. And here I put an image that probably some of you saw previously. So you have an idea that is rough sketch. Okay, I want to do something like this. Fine. Then what I usually do is I quickly prepare a draft. It can be some number of sentences. So often what I can do is I can just be, commuting or walking somewhere or just have an idea, and I can just pull up my phone, quickly write it down into my notes, and that's fine. So I have a draft slowly converging. Then that draft can be polished. So now you start polishing it, looking nice, maybe better. So I will give you more idea about this. And finally, you post it. So when you post it, it may look different from the idea. Conceptual is the same, but it should be well polished and clear. And in that case, of course, you expect much better impact on the community. Not because the community is not interested. So people may like the idea and they may like it at all, fine. But the problem is that your algorithms that will be sorting the posts out, they may put your post in a garbage bin because it just doesn't look like something very valuable for others. So again, this is where you have to keep in mind that the more you polish it, the better. So in some cases, it's better to over polish than not, at least at the beginning, because later you can learn how to make it quickly without really investing too much time into this. So if this is a timeline, you can start with an idea where you have the key idea. So what is the key idea? So for example, what is the reason why many postdocs fail their research projects, for example, or some PhD students really excel very well in their projects, or something like this. Then you have to define your post type. So like I said, is it like a promotional post? Is it something that is intended to mentor people, to help them, or maybe something else? Then you have to know your audience. So if your audience among your followers is not really in academia, then you don't expect them to be interested in your paper that you may put online. And of course, the goals. Then you write the draft, the key messages. Then those key messages can be quickly transformed into full text. If you want, you can use some ChatGPT, but I personally try to refrain from it, but some people do it, so it works too, just to accelerate it. Then this is the drafting stage. So a couple of iterations usually work well. Then of course, if you have an image, that's great. Most social media promote your posts better if you have an image, but your image has to also be on your side, so it should ignite the audience if possible. So it can be technical. Do you want to make it very technical because your audience is technical? Or do you want to make it emotional because your post is about certain things that are emotional, causing emotions? Or is it just supplementary, just to supplement your post? So then usually my suggestion is you have the draft, cut 30% out. Read it and think, okay, what's not so important? Because often when you draft something, you have a lot of sentences that are really too long, sort of. So they bring little value because density of information is small. Then you can cut another 20% from the remaining, and that is what I call text condensation. That's what we do often during the research proposal writing or paper writing and so on. So actually it's very similar to paper preparation. Then you post, and that's when timing is so important. So your timing should be when your audience is there. Now, where your audience is depends. So for example, if most of my audience is in the US, then I have to think of the timing that is best for the US. Usually it's the morning or somewhere close to the lunchtime. If my audience is mostly in Asia, then I have to change the time completely. So again, it depends on where your audience is. And finally, what people call curation, I don't like it, to be honest, this word, but okay, let's call it curation. And that's when you're present still for some number of hours. You're occasionally checking what's happening to your post because people write comments. And people do want to see, of course, your replies because you're a real person. So it gives your post a lot more authenticity, sort of, or authority, if you like it, because it looks like you're not just a text generation machine. You're really replying to people. You're giving more clarification and so on. And that now becomes a routine. If you can make it into a routine, say one post a week, that's fine. And that way you also learn how to write, how to make great images, how to discuss things professionally online and so on. So this is very helpful. And this is the routine that I normally use myself from, okay, so maybe these days it's slightly different, but at least when I was starting, this is what I was using. And now I want to talk a little bit about, like, I have a few more slides about the propagation of posts. So there are two mechanisms. For those of you who are not really in social media, there are usually two mechanisms for promotion.
Andrew, there is a question about, because it's from your previous slide, it's about how do you deal with the comment section, both positive and negative ones?
Okay.
So how do you answer?
I think this is where my suggestion is to be, I mean, I know that there are different people. So there are people who can react more personally to how people comment their posts. And there are people who will become a lot less reactive if somebody posts something negative about their posts, again, comments in a negative way. My suggestion is to be as positive as possible most of the time. So let's suppose the comment is obviously trying to provoke you. You can just ignore it. You don't have to respond to all the comments. Like I have so many comments, sometimes I just don't have time for this. My goal is to bring the value to people, but it's not like to have one-on-one interaction with every single person online. That's impossible. Next is if you comment is something that you think, okay, you can really respond and there's something interesting that you can write, okay, go ahead and do it. Because some people may follow up with you in a personal messages and say, okay, yeah, I like the idea that you put. Maybe you want to give a talk in our place, or maybe we can discuss it further, or maybe we can write a paper on this. So it's happening. And so your comments are helpful. Next is if you comment, the algorithms improve the propagation of your posts automatically. If you comment, again, it means that you're communicative for your profile. That also is very important. And that's where I should say that you should comment not only on your response to the comments to your posts, also try to leave comments under other posts, because that gives them a sense, the algorithms, a sense that you're a social person. It's a social media. The algorithms want to see that you're really online, not just for your own posts. So again, if it's a positive, you can respond. If it's a negative, you don't have to respond. My suggestion also would be to be, of course, careful how you respond. So you should keep in mind that it's your reputation. Imagine that you're, like I already said, imagine that you have all this audience in front of you in real life. You're at a conference and somebody asks you a very provocative question, maybe even attacking you with a question. Would you respond in a similar manner? Perhaps no, right? The right way would be, okay, you just let it go lightly. You don't have to be giving a hard response. Same is in a social media. At least that would be my suggestion. And again, everyone is different. So some people really like to provoke others. So it's up to you. But my suggestion is to be, and don't assume that you have to respond to comments. This is something that some people think, oh, somebody left a comment on my post, I have to respond. What can I say? And then they start thinking, and like it doesn't make sense. There's no need for this. If you feel like, okay, that I have nothing to say that is valuable, okay, let me just skip it, because what can you say? There's so many comments that you can get, and so what? Okay, at this point, I want to talk about the mechanisms. So typically, when you post something online, there are several mechanisms. For promotion of your post, meaning that more people will see it, and devaluation, meaning less people will see it. First is the algorithm-based, and second, the audience-based. The algorithm-based means the following. You can get devaluation if your topic is wrong. So let's say your audience is so you typically post in a completely different type of audience, and then you write about, I don't know, marketing of clothes instead of scientific papers. So then now your topic is too much off, and then you will probably be devaluated by the algorithms. So you can have wrong writing. So if your writing style is really off balance, sort of, or you put some words that are red flags, the algorithm will automatically devaluate it. If you have a link inside a post, we often see the algorithms to devaluate your posts several times. You can get several times smaller audience. You can have also wrong hashtags, or the lack of hashtags can also devaluate your posts. Somebody downvotes your post or doesn't like it, so it just skips. That also gives a sense to the algorithm that your post is not that valuable. At the same time, the audience itself affects it. So again, likes, like I said, downvotes are likes. So you can have downvotes. Downvotes are not likes. This is when you really think that the post is not appropriate. You can click OK. You can just let the algorithm know that it's not appropriate, and that's really big red flag for that. You can leave likes. If you leave a like, so the post is of course promoted. You can repost it. That's 2. Comments, discussions. That's super essential. So the more comments you have, of course, the more the algorithm understands that the audience is interested. And then who reacts also matters. Reading time. So if your post is really short, people spend, say, 10 seconds on your post. That tells the algorithm that the post probably was not that interesting. If they spend a minute on your post, that means that the post was interesting. So a longer post is usually promoted better by the algorithms. However, the audience, people in the audience themselves may not like long posts. So then your post should be super valuable. So they want to really spend that minute. So you have to balance it then, and that's the difficulty. And finally, the visuals. Of course, if you have nice visual, the audience may just like it. So there are 2 ways you can, again, promote and devaluate the post online. And this is where I want to get to a very important thing that I usually tell people when I talk about the social media is what I call a resonance. So yeah, perhaps I will not go into technical details, but let's suppose you have an audience response. So how many people respond to your post, how many people read it, how many people find it interesting, in other words, and how carefully you craft your post, how you put the visuals, what kind of emotions you include in your post, what sort of timing you use, and so on. And it's similar to, say, an oscillator in mechanics. So you have a transmissibility, and then you have frequency ratio, and then you get it into resonance. So the same here. Your audience, you can get in a resonance with your audience. So let's suppose I showed you previously a post that I put when I had much fewer followers, and that post got a lot of attention. So that means that I'm somewhere here. Probably not at the very top, but somewhere here. So I went closer to the resonance. So people really found it helpful. And now today's post was here. Just 1 reaction, 100 impressions at nothing, pretty much 0. So like I said, you can get into resonance if you have the right way of putting things together. And that helps you also, of course, understand how to put things together, because if something works on social media, it will work in reality too. So it will help you create better presentations, give better talks, maybe present yourself, go through interviews more effectively, because you know how to communicate in the right way. And now speaking about the audience. So imagine that this triangle is like I wouldn't say pyramid, but like a distribution of people depending on their social status, depending on their jobs, depending on their interests, depending on their education, and so on. So this is your audience. And you can post different things. So typically all the technical posts, they cover a small range of audience. You can cover a really small range of audience somewhere here, where a lot of professionals are sitting, but there are not that many professionals compared to people who are not really professional in a very specific direction. So this is like a niche, more like. So you can cover it, but you will get very few people reacting to your post as a result. But those people might be really technical, so maybe you want to get their attention. Then you can have an opinion. If you write about an opinion that will be correctly written, then you can get an audience starting from really specific experts or some specific people to maybe a more broader audience. Then, of course, if you write about the education and mentorship, you can cover a lot more. Typically, ads, advertisements, they cover a small range. And that's how the social media also works. Unless you pay for promotion, you will not go far. And this is where actually a lot of companies also struggle with advertising online, you can find some companies are exceptionally good at advertising online. There are things they don't need to pay for advertisement. They get lots of likes and lots of people finding their posts to be valuable. And others struggle a lot because the products that they have cover a very narrow range in the audience, and so they don't get the post propagating far. Whether they need it or not, that's a different story, but that's the reality. So this is where I think that you should see sort of if you do online activities on social media, you can see it as sort of marketing efforts. So you get experience in marketing, a quite unique experience because it's your personal experience. And finally, of course, you can have promotions and updates. Those usually cover a big range. So if you post something technical, don't expect to get a huge number of people. If you write something educational and you get really tiny number of people interested, it means that you wrote it too technically. And if you use this diagram, it gives you an idea of sort of whether you're really covering the right part of the audience. So what doesn't work? Let me give you a few examples. This is one example that I took from online. I'm not showing who exactly posted it. Doesn't matter in this case. It's just, okay, this is a game changer. South Korea is about to launch digital AI textbooks in schools by whatever. Okay, great. There's some facts, but like there's really big value for everyone. And then you see like it doesn't really go far. 6 days old, very few really reactions and little propagation because the audience is rather narrow, the actual audience is rather narrow, even though the post is written in a simple way. Few people are interested. Another post, what works? So this is a short post. You can see it, you can see such posts everywhere, and you can see that the number of reactions is tremendous. Why? Because it explains the dialogue between an employee and a boss. So that dialogue is quite emotional. It triggers emotions, and people see that at the end, there is a message. We don't have to wait until employees quit to finally make a change. Okay, fine. That makes sense. So a lot of people will relate to this post. They will find it to be resonating with their own views, with their own experience. And so as a result, as you see that, it goes into resonance. At the same time, I should say that in my experience, maybe I'm just not very good at ChatGPT, but these kind of MMLs, they typically cannot write these types of posts in a way that would trigger an emotional response from a big audience. They can write in a similar way, but it will not write in exactly this way. So when you write it, you have to think, okay, you can use ChatGPT to just make a draft, maybe, if you want. But my suggestion is to polish it completely and rewrite it yourself, because that helps you understand how to do this. That teaches you something. And second is that it really connects the emotion. It brings the emotion sort of in your post because you can do it. Another example is like a sort of fun post and half fun post. That's one of mine. It was posted a while ago, so there was there's a ranking that is still existent. It's called Best Physics Scientists. You can also check others. And what I did is, okay, I don't like really ranking. So if you talk to me, I will say a lot of bad things about ranking. I think they're detrimental to science. However, if you check who's there, you can put Albert Einstein, and you will find that Einstein has a pretty bad ranking, like really bad, right? Okay, fine. So does it mean that this ranking is really useful? So okay, I can write a short post about this in a fun way, but also in a way that says, okay, there is a problem. And usually people will find it useful. And this is another way to post it. So you don't have to be valuable in a direct way like you give an advice, but rather you trigger the community to rethink the concepts. That's one example. Another example is a long post. So here it's a 1 week, well, no, I think it's 2 week long, 2 week old post, or 3 even, that I posted just this June about the rejections of papers and grants. So my message, I always start with the message. I say, rejection of your paper or grant has no relevance to the opinion of research community. If somebody rejected it, doesn't mean that the whole community thinks it's bad. It just means that somebody specifically thinks it's bad. And that's a long post. You can see left, then right, then again, whole lot of text, right? It's a very long one. And then I put as an image this nature snapshot of nature rejection from 1992. It's a well-known work, so you can check it online if you're curious. Now that post got a pretty good response. So it's about 2 million impressions, means that 2 million people read it, or at least looked at this. That's a very good propagation. It means that, okay, the community was affected. The community started to think, hopefully. And of course, I got a lot of response too. So that's another way that you can see that a very long post that people may find not really interesting to read at all still triggered the community. So you can make short, long, and different ways, but it should be valuable. Another way is what works is your personal events. A lot of people write about the personal things. I often find them to go worse, sort of. So fewer people will read it, fewer people will be interested. If you just say, oh, like, I just traveled to Seattle. Okay, great. So what? What is there for me personally? So my message is, don't assume that your post is valuable because it's valuable to you. It should be valuable to others. So you should bring the value for others. So for example, here I met with one of my friends when I was in San Francisco, and then I wrote a post here. So I wrote a post about that I'm not really much into small talks. I don't like small talks. They're great maybe, but I just don't find them to be valuable. And I wrote about this in the context of my very long conversation with Natalia, whom I met there with a picture. So I just turned a personal post into something valuable for the community. And of course, the community found it to be useful. Okay, and finally, I want to get into a few more slides. This is about sort of the breakdown. So I can take that post that I showed here, and I can break down into different parts. So you see that I have gaps. That gives my post a better look, and that's easier to read. When you have a wall of text, it's impossible to read for anyone. People usually skip it because they don't have time. This is easier to read. Now, I usually start something like this with a main message, perhaps my personal take if I want to. So what matters to me and what I find to be important for others to know or to consider. I can give a brief story, some introduction, and so on. Then I can write something extra to trigger some emotional response, because we all are people. A lot of people respond to your post because you trigger their emotions in one way or another. So you can write a very technical paper that will trigger my emotions because I will think, oh, that's a great idea, and I will like the post. Or you can write a completely non-technical one that will not trigger my emotions. I will find it to be, it's okay, so what? Then, sorry, that's it. So emotions are very important. And so in some way, you can learn about the human psychology and psychology of crowds slowly as you keep working on social media. And I often advise people to finish with a message. So you should be clear and brief, and your message should be clear. And finally, hashtags. Hashtags are for algorithms. They propagate your posts within specific groups that follow certain hashtags. You can check on LinkedIn which hashtags are followed in which way and how many followers they have. So you have to find the right combination of hashtags, not super followed, not super under followed. So this is where you can propagate your posts further. That helps a lot. Now, this is the final thing that I want to say about the research papers. So of course, some of you are researchers, I hope. And that means that I find many scientists to be struggling with posting their papers, their studies online and making sure that they can propagate far enough so more audience reads them. And this is where I want to give this example. So we published a while ago with Sergey Kalinin a paper on overpublishing, which means that, okay, we publish too many papers that nobody can read. So can we really change the situation so the community brings more value to everyone, to libraries, if you like it, because we have too much overpublishing. So that was a small correspondence that we published. And then what I did is I wrote a post where I described what the issues are, what we think it can create for everyone, kind of problems it creates, the current issues in the field, what kind of possible solutions we can provide and we describe it in the paper, our own vision for this. Okay, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 type of post. And that actually is very easy to read, of course. So the easiness of reading the post is very essential. That can change completely the way your post propagates. And that's it. And then I have a message. And then I can provide a link. And as you see, I say the link is below in a comment. I don't include it inside the post because that will cut the number of views by 3 at least. And then, of course, I have hashtags. So that way, okay, the post can propagate to a few thousand. And the same way you can do for a technical paper. For a technical, you just want to make sure that it's written in a simple way so broader audience can be triggered by this. So just to summarize it. So what kind of strategy you can, what I would at least suggest you to go if you're interested in this, or to how to improve. So at first you can duplicate others if you want to go the safe way. In some way, it's better to duplicate others than to not do anything. However, at some point, of course, you want to find a niche. So what might be important for you to post about for the next 1-2 years? So what is your what is so special about you? What you feel like is interesting to others, but also is interesting to you, and something that you can bring that others don't bring on. And believe me, there are lots of things like this for everyone. So everyone is unique in some way. And social media can help you find your uniqueness, like I said. Think of subdirections. So at some point you start to think, okay, what about this? What about that? What about those topics? That helps. Then at some point you start to connect with people who are active too. Of course, you have to leave, I would say, better insightful comments, because some comments can bring you a lot of attention if you want to have a better impact on the community. So you can post comments on the posts, leaving your opinions and so on. Of course, connecting with people is important. So don't assume that you can be you can have 1 or 2 people following yourself, and then have a lot of people following you. It's rare. Usually you have to accumulate a certain mass, if you like it, at the beginning to keep growth going. So usually I would say about 1,000 people would be nice at the beginning. Then you identify what others are missing in their posts. And that's essential. When you read other posts, try to analyze them. What is something that people are missing? What is something that you can bring in a unique way? Develop your own vision. That's slowly developing. Some people develop their own vision and start their own business online as a result, because they find that, okay, there's a big niche that nobody has ever tried to cover, and I can really take it all, essentially. So some people build businesses on this, and you can find them a lot on LinkedIn. And then if you want to be careful, okay, you can carefully add more and more about yourself, your story, your personality, and so on. So if you don't have to post about yourself, you don't have to post your photos or something like this in general. So if you're afraid of this, if you're afraid of social media attention, you can just go the safe way. But at some point, you will probably find it to be important that your personality also comes across the audience. And finally, inspire people. That's what we all want. We want to be inspired because we're looking for something new all the time. That's how our brain works. We want something new. And you can be one of the people who can bring that novelty. And that also comes to leadership, of course. Leadership is about inspiring people, and that's about bringing something new for others. So finally, my main message is don't just post for the sake of posting. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I find people making. They just keep posting on a daily basis, something that is hardly valuable. In that case, you cannot get the professional audience on your side. I haven't seen such cases, to be honest. Okay, with this, I am finishing this. It actually took almost 1 hour. I thought it would take about half an hour. So please, I'm open to questions.
There are 2 in the chat, but because there is already a few in the chat, but you can have answered them in between. But there is one from that say that how is your experience with talking to several audience on a new follower? And with the rapid growing number of followers, do you lose reach or connection with a technical expert in your network? And so how will you basically base your strategy for your audience? Yes.
Yeah.
How do you engage actually your different audience? I think it's basically the question.
This is more of an advanced thing. So it really depends. I think that usually if you have your own, let's suppose you have 300-400 people in your network who work in your field, and then you post something about your work, about your research work. So those people will likely see it because the algorithm will show it. That's my experience. But it also means that you will not get that many likes. But usually, if you're really professional in certain direction, the algorithm tries to put you up front for those who might be interested in your field. Now, if you go broadly, this is where things become difficult. So let's suppose I have a lot of followers, like I do now, and then I post something about marketing strategies. I never post about marketing. So it means that I can put the hashtags, you can write a perfect post and so on. I will get very little attention because I cannot get out of my own audience. My own audience is not in marketing. This is where the problem is often. So the question is about how do you talk to several audiences? I think you can. The way I see it is that you see each audience, if you like it, or each sort of group of people as a separate type of audience. So you have your posts for this kind of people, then you have your posts for other types of people. And that's the only way you can do it professionally. I don't think there's any way that you can post something technical for the people who are not in your technical field. There's no way. You can post, of course, something really broad, but that will not be professional. That will be just broad, like a broad advice on, how to cook potatoes. Okay, everyone cooks potatoes, so of course everyone should respond, but like, it's not professional. So
and
I'm not sure if it's helpful. Yeah.
I think a bit in the same direction. There is another question from Respan. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. Is that if you ever engage in cleaning your audience, so if you remove certain people because they're not relevant, or basically you just let it the way it is?
Well, the audience is defined by the algorithms. It's not just your followers. It's often, like I showed, you can get 10,000 likes, but you can get 1 million of people. You can, at the same time, you can have 10,000 people following you and 1 million of people in your audience who really read your posts. You can't control it anyway. The only thing is, just a second, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. My cat was getting a bit crazy.
Actually, it was referring to your connection more than your audience. Like if you, I will say that I don't know if in LinkedIn you can do that, but definitely on Twitter you can block people if they do hateful comment or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yes, you can, but then you just block people from being visible to you. I don't know if you can block people from seeing your posts. If that's the question. So in general, if the question is about whether I do this, I never do it. I have so many followers, I don't have time to really check who's following me for what reason. And I mean, if somebody doesn't like what I do, they can unfollow me. That's no problem. But of course, I can get some, let's say, some not very good comments or something like this on in personal messages, or some strange messages or some advertisement messages, I can in principle block people if I want, but I never really had to do it. I could just ignore it. For me, the best way is just to ignore it.
Okay. There is another question related, like if you post the honest experience and tips for academia, how you avoid basically that your boss or supervisors see it?
I would say that you probably will not be able to do this completely with 100% certainty, because there are no, as far as I know, there are no ways that you can block specific person from seeing your posts. Like I said, the social media decides who sees this. This is one of the things that I don't think there's any easy way to go around it. What you can do is then you can post things that you know will not trigger your boss or your corporation, your institute to respond to that. Because everyone can post bad things, right? But there are so many good things you can post too that will help others, but at the same time will not interfere with your employer. So that would be my suggestion. But there's no way you can prevent it, 100%.
Actually, there are many questions. Another one is someone wants to know what made you get started on LinkedIn. So how did you basically, what motivated you to start being active there?
That would be more of a personal story. So I tend to, when you're active on social media, you try to also be careful as to what you say from your personal life, what you also talk about in general, and your personal experience and so on. So you start getting those lines very, very well defined. So this is where I would say I don't think there's much I can say, except that what triggered me was perhaps the fact that we had a pandemic, and there was very little, very few interacting with each other at conferences, of course. So for me, it was an interesting experiment whether I can use social media to express what I think without going to conferences, without talking to people in person all the time. So, and if you check my very early posts, you can do that. You will see that they are super careful. They're like super safe. So I could take, say, a paper from Nature and say, oh, there's a nice study that showed this and this and this. Some people said, yeah, fine, great. So that's when I started. And I was just, okay, I was curious if I can interact with the broader community because there's a pandemic in a field of research, in a field of science. And then once you start, then at some point you realize that, okay, there's more and more and more that you can bring on the table. And then at some point you realize that, okay, there's so much that people are missing because some people are afraid to discuss, like you said, they have maybe a boss who's unhappy, or they're afraid to discuss certain things because funding managers may reject funding. They can't just, sometimes you can't criticize the system. And then I understand, okay, maybe I am in a position when I can criticize it because my personality is like this. I don't feel like I'm very, how to say, I feel like I'm one of those people who can post what I think is important. You will find many people like this on social media, but you will also find a lot of people who will say, we're afraid of social media because whatever we put there, what if everyone reads it? In reality, very few people will read it. And so that's how I started. And I think that then eventually it just became sort of a way for me to communicate to a broader community. And of course, what also helps actually often is the feedback, so comments in your posts, people writing to you personal messages. Those can be quite supportive at the beginning. So it can be quite helpful because if you're just starting, it's like you don't know what you're doing. You're not sure if you're doing the right thing. And so people who comment on your post will help you.
So there are so many questions. I lost a bit of track, but there was a question a few lines before about what happened.
Let me go very quickly, maybe over. So where we are, which time is that for the questions?
Yeah, so that's the point. I missed one. So we are about like 307. So I missed one before, which was about what happened to algorithm of the post if you edit it immediately after posting it.
If you edit it.
Yes.
I find it, at least lately, I found it to be less important if you make tiny changes. If you completely revamp the post, of course, the algorithm will. So usually, from my understanding, the algorithm just reads your post or reevaluates it. So if you have something, if you have exactly the same post, you just put a couple of extra words, that shouldn't change much. But if you change the whole sentences, like for half of the post, then yeah, you may get lower engagement. But I don't find, in my experience, it doesn't seem to be reducing the reach. That's in my experience. There are lots of things that you will find online, perhaps that will be many materials describing how you should post, what you should be avoiding on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and so on. Many of them are correct, but many of them are old. So every year, the algorithms change. We had a big change in I think, less than a year ago on LinkedIn that completely changed the way that people could propagate their posts. So yeah, it really, often you have to try, and then you will see. My suggestion, of course, is to have your post in a final form before you post it. If you feel like, oh, there is like a typo that can make a big difference, change it. It won't change the way it will propagate. But if you want to completely change it, I would not suggest doing it. You can just delete it and start again if you want.
Okay. And so there is a question about, do you think posting meme or funny stuff on LinkedIn is a good move?
Not for the professional audience. Again, people need to see the value. So if, like, let's suppose I would say that I'm maybe partly professional. So it means that I have very little time. And then when I read something, that should let me think, trigger me some way, should be helpful, something that maybe I may be able to use, or maybe it should trigger me to reach back to you and say, oh, I like really this thing, and maybe we can partner in some way to whatever, make it happen. So in that sense, if you just post a meme, I don't know, how can I use it?
So you talked a little about, I will just like skip a question because I think it might be relevant for other people. So you talked a lot about LinkedIn, which for me, it's very professional platform. But if you use Twitter, do you keep it professional as well? Or do you mix personal and professional things?
That's up to you.
Okay.
This is where I should say everything is up to you. So my presentation is more about making it professional, how to do it, in my experience, but then the way you do it is the way you do it. Some people like mixing it. The reason why I mostly discuss LinkedIn here is because it's made for professional interactions. It's much easier to build your professional network, your professional opinions, your professional reputation on LinkedIn than on Twitter. On Twitter, people post everything. So yeah, you can have also, Twitter account that just posts stuff that nobody finds professional enough. That's fine if you want. But you can do, what I found also is that you can also post a lot of professional things on LinkedIn and Twitter at the same time. So what you can just take your post from LinkedIn, post it on Twitter. Totally fine. You will probably find a lot of engagement. I usually find quite a bit of engagement then. But the only thing is that on LinkedIn, the way that the algorithms select the post is based on how many followers you have too, and the way you write the post is slightly different. On Twitter, I think you have, my impression is that a little bit more, like it shows to a broader audience. So some of my posts could propagate further on Twitter despite a smaller number of followers than on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is trying to really understand if your post belongs to this kind of people or those kind of people, and then it shows to those people. And if those people don't find it useful, it will quickly devaluate your post and it will be done. So in some way, LinkedIn is more complex to navigate than Twitter, because on Twitter you have all sorts of posts. So you just need to grab the attention. But on LinkedIn, you not only have to grab the attention, but also get people interested. That's a different thing.
So there is another question from Anas, which is, how do you deal with information overload and potential distraction from the social media? So I guess, like, how do you avoid spending 6 hours of your day on social media? And
I mean, there are many ways. Depends on what is valuable for you. So you can get a lot of useful things for social media, or you can just cut down your time on it. So I mean, it's more like how do you spend your time during the day, right? That's the type of question. So it's hard to really.
I'm not really sure. Maybe she can. I hope it's a she. Or maybe they can detail in the chat about what exactly the question is about.
There's no way that you can stop being distracted by social media completely, unless you turn off your phone and so on. And I don't think it's really important. What I found to be important is to keep an eye on things that are important to me on social media. So I can follow certain people and like certain posts more or less regularly. And that gives me a chance to read those people again and again every time I open it. But that way, sort of, it helps algorithms sort out the posts for me. So I don't have a lot of junk in my tray. I have useful things. And then, for example, I can use social media when I'm commuting, or when I have, I don't know, a lunch, or when it's totally fine for me. It's just the way that you just need to understand what is more valuable for you.
And I think a bit related is kind of.
Everyone is different. So this is where everyone is different. Everyone has different habits and different ways of getting addicted. So you can't generalize. You have to find your own way.
And so I think a bit related is, like, how do you build your connection? Like, if you had tips. So the question is more kind of the person is receiving many linking connection requests, but not necessarily relevant to the area of interest or expertise. So is it better to accept all of them? So what is your thought about that?
So first of all, there is a limit on the number of connections you can have. I think it's about 30,000 or so. I don't remember. They may change it, but it's been like this for a long time, which means that you have only a limited number of people you can accept. But of course, if you have only a few thousand connections, it doesn't really matter. For me, it matters now. So I can't accept every single connection because I have fewer slots left in some way. When it comes to whether accept or not, it doesn't really make, in my opinion, it doesn't really do any damage to accept a connection. It's not like you're forced to communicate with a person or something. The only thing is you may see a couple of posts from that person for a few times. If you don't like those posts, if you just keep them, they will not appear again. So you will just have that person as a connection. But the good thing is that that person will see your posts. My opinion is that at the beginning, of course, it's better to start start connecting with people in the niche that you want to cover. So say you want to work with people who are chemists, connect with chemists, but don't connect with people who never posted anything, because they will be like the audience that is not present actually online. So try to find the people who post something interesting and then connect. That would be my suggestion, because that way you build the real audience that is really there.
And what is the difference? Because you slightly, basically you slipped during, now LinkedIn implemented for 6 months ago, a year ago, the difference between following and connecting. What does it mean in terms of algorithm? Like, does it change anything if you connect or if you just follow?
I mean, if you connect, you just have a connection, you can write messages, and you can, so both people on both sides see each other's posts, as long as they're interested in those posts. Again, that's what connection means. Following means you just see the post of a person. That's the difference.
Okay. Yes. Okay, cool. And there are 2 more questions. So one is, any tips specific to promoting pages on LinkedIn?
Pages?
Pages. I guess, like, what we have, like the European Federation of Corrosion, for instance, we have a page, which is not a person, but more an association. I have the feeling, I don't know, can Husband, can you maybe add some information about this? Or unmute.
So, yeah.
Or unmute yourself and just like ask the question.
He wrote yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
meanwhile,
yeah. So meanwhile, let's do the other question. Sorry, I guess we have a bit of delay. If you post as an individual, which is sometimes different, or you have different view than the organism where you work, how do you? So people will still make the link, kind of. And so how do you avoid or deal with consequences of your organization being not very happy with your post or opinion? And actually, there's the example of Michael Hill article in Nature.
Yeah. So the question is, how do you avoid the problems
basically
with your organization?
Yeah, exactly.
Because of your post. So that's, again, it repeats the previous question. There is no simple answer. You have to find your own way. Okay, so there's one simple answer. Don't post anything that will make people angry in your organization. That's the only way. But if you find that there are no posts you can post, like everything will get them angry, then I don't know if there's any simple way, because somebody from your organization may read it. If you want, you can, of course, try to disengage from your organization, meaning that on LinkedIn, you can put where you work, you can put your organization that will be recognized as a LinkedIn organization, right? So let's say you work at, I don't know, Harvard University, you can put Harvard University, and then it will show up as a Harvard University. But then it means that it's connected to Harvard, to whatever you write yourself will show up in a Harvard University posts from employees, sort of. So you can try to disconnect it. So you will be just from a fake Harvard University then. That way you can try to do it. That way, so you will ensure that people from your organization will not automatically see your posts. But I don't think it will go far because, again, posts that are great will go far anyway. So people will see it. My only suggestion is to just post things that are safe. Well, maybe look for another organization later while you're posting something that is safe. So I think if your employer is very sensitive about even simple things posted online, there's something wrong with your employer. That's my opinion. If they're only sensitive with things that belong to them, that makes sense. So there's a corporate ethics that you will find in most places, in most companies, and of course you cannot post against the corporate ethics, but those ethics are usually quite mild in terms of the number of topics and the types of content that you can put. So you can still find lots of niches where you can develop your audience, you can develop your interaction and so on. But the good thing is that when you get a lot of followers and you get a very good audience and people interested in what you can bring to them, you will actually see niches for your own business. So a lot of people do this way. They start from something simple while working somewhere, and they end up with their own business because of their own network. And then you can post whatever you like. So just saying that there are lots of potential ways to go. Just find your own way.
Thank you. And so basically, about the how to promote a page, there was apparently you have the possibility to create a page, which can be for a business.
Okay. So this is So this is where I don't have experience with promoting your own business, because you can have a business page on LinkedIn. This is where I cannot really help, because I don't know if there is any difference with personal profiles. What I find to be more sort of engaging is usually a personal profile is a lot more engaging than a corporate profile, because that's how people work, right? That's how our brain works. We want to socialize not with a corporation, but with a person, with somebody who can bring emotions to us, who can bring some new information to us, and so on. So in those cases, I would say that if that page is very, very important, okay, maybe you need to contact people who are professional with promoting pages. If that page is just like, okay, it's kind of a substitute for your own profile, in that case, try to use your own profile. With the same types of posts, you will get a lot more likes and more people interested in your personality. Because if you have your own little business and then you have your own page, that's fine. But then again, it's difficult to promote pages unless they themselves bring a lot of value. But usually again, specific people, persons, they can get a lot more engagement than pages. That's my impression. So I usually advise people, okay, if they're starting a company, first try to make their own personal accounts, personal LinkedIn profiles to be visible. Once you get them visible, then you can get your organization to be visible. The other way around, you will get yourself not visible and you will not get your organization visible, unless you want to wait for like 5 years before it grows. So at least this is what I see when I'm on social media.
Perfect. Are there any other questions? Doesn't seem like it.
And regarding the guaranteed solutions, I think this is where I should highlight that everything that I'm saying here is, again, part of my experience. Everyone may have different experiences. You may talk also to people who have huge audiences, who've grown to millions without having a CEO or whatever in their profile as a title. So in those cases, they will probably give you a bit more. But in general, there's a general theme that I described. But in general, there is no guarantee anywhere. So you just have to try. It's like social media, again, it's a social thing. So you have to go and try. You have your audience, try it. Find your own way, because you are a person, and in social media, people like seeing personality. They don't like seeing just text. We can have ChatGPT for text. That's not a problem.
Okay, there is a last question coming, which is there a way to edit post on Twitter and to change images on LinkedIn? Which I don't necessarily.
I don't think there's any way you can change the image. So once you post it, you posted it. You can't replace it, the image. You can change text, but not the image on LinkedIn. So double check your image before you post it. For Twitter, you can probably change your post if you pay for your Twitter Blue, I think, but maybe for some amount of minutes. I'm not sure, like half an hour perhaps. So the good thing about Twitter is that you can pay, if you pay like, I don't know, like $6 or $8 per month, you can get that extra features that will help you, that will give you this option to post really long tweets. So you can turn your LinkedIn tweets, which are long, into Twitter tweets just by reposting it directly. Before, it was more challenging. You had to break it down, and then you had to condense it, and there's so many other things. But today it's easier. So I would suggest using it if you want to invest into this.
Thank you. So I think we will close the session of today.
We ran out of questions, so thank you for those who stayed until the end. I know it's been a long story, so hopefully it was helpful.
But very interesting. I learned so many things, and I think it will be beneficial because the Croatian community is not very active on social media. And so our aim is to bring a bit more active people on LinkedIn and other platforms. So thank you so much. I hope for the audience that you liked it and that you can join us for other science communication event or just have a look. Thank you, Andrew, so much.
Thank you, Naomi. It was great. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah. So see you another time. Bye.
Sure. Bye.